Hello everybody and welcome back to the Mixed Martial Podcast. This is episode 11. It has been a minute. This is the first episode of 2024. I wanted to leave it until there was some juicy stuff to talk about, and I felt like in this past couple of weeks there hasn't really been anything too big. UFC 297 was pretty big with the controversy about the decision between Strickland and Duplessis, but I didn't think it was worth making an episode over, plus the rest of that card was pretty mid. But post UFC 298 and post UFC 300 main event announcement, I am here and we have some stuff to talk about. So, speaking of UFC 300's main event announcement, Alex Pereira versus Jamal Hill. Now, I am quite happy with this fight, let me say that first. However, I'm surprised that it's been announced because, as we all know, Jamal Hill ruptured his Achilles in July of last year. They said it was about a 12-month injury to recover from. It is about a 12-month injury to recover from, and he is back in April, making that a 10-month recovery. Doable, especially with the amount of high-level medical teams that the UFC has access to and whatnot, but strange. Definitely strange, and unexpected. I hope it goes well. I hope that Jamal is confident in how much he's healed, and I hope that he believes he's at 100%. And if that's the case, fuck yeah, let's get this fight underway. As for the talks about the disappointment of this announcement, I think the way that they announced it was terrible. They just dropped it on Instagram after UFC 298. They had so much dead air throughout the weeks leading up to UFC 298 where everybody wanted to know what was going to happen. For weeks on end, Dana was saying, a main event's coming in a couple days, next week. Yeah, I'll have it for you by the end of the week, you know. And he just kept dragging it. I think that they honestly should have announced it. Maybe they simply didn't have the fight confirmed to be able to announce it. But that hasn't stopped them before, right? They've announced plenty of fights that haven't been agreed on before they're agreed on, you know. Maybe 300 is a bit of a risk to take. It's a bit of a risk to take doing that on UFC 300's main event, but regardless, they fucked it up by waiting so long. It would have been fine though if they didn't oversell it. If Dana didn't oversell the absolute shit out of this fight, because he said Leon had 3 separate opponents offered to him. This is not confirmed. My guess, Shavkat. Oh, no, it's been confirmed by Ariel Helwani now. Shavkat, Khamzat, and Makhachev were the 3 guys that Leon was offered. Apparently Leon said yes to all 3, but all 3 of the other guys were not in on it, which really interests me because regardless of Ramadan, I'm very shocked that Makhachev didn't take that double champ opportunity right then and there, because he's been asking for it for a long time, and clearly Leon said yes to it and Islam said no. So that's something to note. For sure, that's something to note. But I think that if the UFC was not confident that they were going to get that Leon fight sorted out with one of those opponents, they shouldn't have been public about it. And if they didn't feel that way, if they did feel like they were confident in the fact that it was going to happen, that's unfortunate because it fell through. But if they didn't come out and say, Dana was saying that this is bigger than Conor, the main event, he said that it's bigger than Conor. So yeah, nah. That's not happening. That's not bigger than Conor. Pereira versus Jamal Hill is awesome, but we all knew it was coming. This is not a surprise fight. Everybody knew this fight would come around. So for you to act like it's going to be a big shock to us is probably the reason that people are disappointed, because it's just a name that we expected to see next to another name at some point. We just weren't really thinking it was going to be the top of UFC 300, but here we are. And that's the world we live in. Is what it is. I'm very happy. The rest of the card is still amazing. Do not let this main event announcement take away from how fucking incredible of a card it is. I spoke about it on one of my Fight Companions recently. There is 11, okay? This was before the main event announcement. With Pereira and Hill, it is now 13, okay? It was 11. It's now 13 former or current champions are fighting on UFC 300. Like 8 of them are in the main card. I think more than half of the main card is current or former champions, including. I'm not including Gaethje as a champion from the BMF belt. I'm including him as a champion from interim champion, if that makes sense, because it's former. But regardless, it doesn't matter. Pereira, previous champion and current champion. Jamal Hill, previous champion. Zhang Weili, current champion. Gaethje, current/previous champion. Max, previous champion. Charles Oliveira, previous champion. Dustin Poirier, previous champion. Alexander Rakic. Yuri Praska, previous champion. Aljamain Sterling, previous champion. Cody Garbrandt, previous champion. Davison Figueiredo, previous champion. Holly Holm, previous champion. Kayla Harrison was a champion outside of the UFC. And RDA is on 299 actually. But still, you get the point. That's so many. So, do not let the main event announcement detract from how awesome this card is going to be. I will be live streaming. I really think that I'm going to do the entire card. I usually only do main cards because I like to stick with the stuff I know. I'm talking about fighters that are publicly well known, that I've done my research on, that I know how to talk about. 300 is pretty much that top to bottom. So I will probably stream that entire event. But regardless, that's 300. Let's move on to UFC 298. Ilia versus Volk. So, what a crazy time it is to be alive. This is the 5th featherweight champion ever in UFC history. And Ilia is the first featherweight champion ever to have not fought Chad Mendes and Jose Aldo. Aside from Jose Aldo, who is Jose Aldo, but he fought Chad Mendes. Every single other featherweight champion has fought those two guys if you are not one of those two guys. Aldo fought Mendes. McGregor fought Aldo and Mendes, both in title fights as well. Holloway fought Aldo and Mendes, I believe, both in title fights as well. And Conor McGregor fought Aldo and Mendes. And Volk fought Aldo and Mendes, both before his title fights. But still, Ilia has not fought either of those people, and he beat Volkanovski. We live in a very new time with these young champions. I think Sugar and Ilia are very, very big driving forces of what the future of UFC champions is going to look like. Honestly, I think they're going to be real young. These guys are both 20. Ilia's 27. O'Malley's 29. O'Malley could be 30 by now, but he's 29. He was 28 when he got the belt, I think. So he must be 29 now. Yeah. Young, dude. Young and hungry, and these guys are getting the belts more and more often. We're seeing more guys like 30 years old, 31. I think Aspinall's only 30 or 31. I think Pantoja's 30, maybe 31. Who else is quite young? Islam's like 32. Young guys are getting to the top again. I don't even know if I say again, because I don't know if that was really ever a thing. But it's overpowering now with style matchups, right? I think it's worth saying that, not worth saying, I think I'm not wrong in saying that grappling is quite the old man strategy. Not exclusive to that, but if you see old people that are successful in combat sports, it's probably in grappling. Striking is the young man's sport. If you see guys that are really successful in combat sports at a young age, they're probably knocking people the fuck out. And that's what Ilia Topuria did. That's what Sean O'Malley did. And these guys aren't... Ilia is. I won't say that about Ilia, but Sean O'Malley is not a grappler. He's got as good a grappling as most UFC fighters would have to have a minimal amount of, for sure. He can grapple, and he's won grappling matches before. But Ilia Topuria is actually a grappler. Yet, it's not what he utilizes. It's the Fist of Fury. We saw a big jump in the UFC of grapplers would always beat boxers. You know, the wrestlers would always come in and just fuck up a kickboxer because he just can't do anything once he's on the floor. But now we've kind of come full circle to the point where we're not reaching the floor anymore. The takedown defense on some of these guys and the ability to read the situation and know what positions them being in will lead to a takedown, as well as what positions them being caught in is escapable, or when they need to commit to accepting the takedown and immediately work on scrambles, things like that. All that stuff is so well taught into these young athletes' heads that they're not grappling anymore. They're all striking. They're all, even the guys that are really, really good at grappling tend to want to strike now. Justin Gaethje, I forget the term for it. All-American wrestler. Only strikes. Islam Makhachev he does wrestle, don't get me wrong, but he is a fucking dirty striker, and he sticks with that majority of the time. Other guys that are, even Charles Oliveira, dude, is a completely like submission artist. But later in his career, he just started to figure out how to put the fucking hands together because it's just effective. And there's some guys that you can't take down, and even if you can't take them down, and even if you can take them down, you can't rely on getting a submission on them without them being damaged. So a lot of the strategy now, even for guys that get a lot of submissions, is to knock you down and then submit you while you're rocked. There's no more of just pulling guard, trying to get in there and armbar you in the first minute of the fight, and you're like, what the fuck just happened? You know, that still happens, but that's not the strategy anymore that's employed by a lot of guys, which it used to be back in the day. Very interesting, man. Very interesting. I think Ilia is a big problem for everyone in featherweight. I think Ilia beats everyone in featherweight. I think Max and Yair stand to be the biggest problems for him, and Volk in a rematch is possible, but I'm not confident. I'd like to see Volk get his rematch because he deserves it, but I'm not confident he'd win it. Max and Yair are the only ones I could see doing it. Yair because he has that height advantage in those kicks, and one of the only things you're probably going to be able to do to get Ilia out of there is to knock him the fuck out. And a heavy kick to the head like Jai Herbert's kick is kind of the only viable path that we've seen for Ilia. There's not really any other time that we have seen Ilia with a weakness to anything besides a tall fucking dude kicking him in the head, which is pretty much everybody's fucking weakness. You know, that's what Makhachev got Volkanovski with. It's just a tall ass dude kicking him in the head. Max and Yair are both very tall dudes. Max doesn't kick as much until recently. He's started to use that a lot more in his game. But both guys present big problems to Ilia, especially in the height advantage, in the height department. And I think Yair more so. Weirdly, I think Max can beat Ilia, but I have this weird feeling that Yair is just a strange matchup for Ilia. Simply because of the distance control that he could use. Ilia might be able to nullify it. But also, Yair's a decent grappler. He's a pretty good grappler, in fact. So he can always fall back on that. Whereas someone like Holloway or Volk fighting Ilia might have okay grappling abilities, but they're never going to fall back onto it. You know, they will always only use that if they're forced to. They will never be like an Oliveira situation where Oliveira gets rocked by Gaethje and he doesn't pull guard, but he doesn't pull guard, but he leans back and sticks his legs up and he kind of just like sits in guard, like in an open guard, ready to grapple. You know, those guys won't do that. They're going to try and get up immediately because they do not want to be on the floor with Ilia because Ilia's just better than them on the floor. Yair might not be a case of that. Yair might actually be able to, upon accepting some damage from Ilia and having to take it to the ground, he might be able to quite effectively grapple with Ilia and maybe even pull off submission attempts, as well as takedown denials, is what I would say that Ilia someone probably needs to employ to beat Ilia. A lot of takedown denial as well as keeping distance, because Ilia will probably shoot for takedowns if he can't get in on you. That would be my guess, because he always manages to get in the pocket and just fucking flog combinations at you. So if he can't do that, maybe then he'll need to employ his grappling. And if that's the case, maybe someone like Yair, who can, you know, keep up to an extent on the floor, is the best option. I don't know. Before we move on from Ilia though, there is one thing I want to mention. I just don't let this make it seem like I'm fanboying out crazily here, even though I kind of am. But I think it's just cool to mention. This is not a revelation of the sport. This does not mean that one thing is going to be another. This is not me searching for parity in this thing. But I think it's some cool statistics. So, Conor McGregor came into the UFC on an 8-fight win streak. So did Ilia Topuria. Conor McGregor went 6-0 in the UFC from his debut, leading to an undisputed title fight. So did Ilia Topuria. Conor McGregor had that title fight at 27 years of age. So did Ilia Topuria. Conor McGregor acted like the champion wasn't all that, and that he wasn't a threat to him, that it was going to be an easy fight, that he was going to wipe the floor with him, when everyone else was scared of that guy, when he was the longest reigning champion at the time, and he was respected pretty heavily by most of the people that were stepping up to fight him. So did Ilia Topuria. And the very last thing, like I just said, Conor McGregor knocked out the featherweight champion, who was the longest reigning UFC champion at the time, with one punch. So did Ilia Topuria. It's just something to note. And they've weirdly both got the same back tattoo. That's just a weird one. And Ilia's chest tattoo is really similar to Conor's. It's a bit different, but it looks like at a glance there's similarities. It's weird stuff. But I don't want to act like Ilia did that on purpose, but I also don't want to say that he entirely thought of all that stuff himself. It's totally possible that maybe he took a bit of inspiration. Who knows? But anyway, let's move on to the next topic. We have Costa versus Whittaker. So Costa is very fucking durable because Whittaker put it on him for most of that fight, and there wasn't really a point where we saw Costa wilt. He started to lose, but he didn't wilt. He was there the whole time. He's a fucking warrior. He was still throwing bombs the whole time. But Whittaker's the man. And this just makes me think about how good is Dricus du Plessis? And how good is Sean Strickland? If Rob Whittaker can do that to the number 6 ranked guy, and Dricus can do that to Robert Whittaker, but yet Sean and Dricus go to war like that, man, that is like... I think that Dricus and Sean are the two best middleweights. Obviously, that's a given. But I think that it goes quite under the radar just how good our top 2 middleweights in the world are right now. And weirdly, because I do think now. I didn't think Dricus was that good. I really didn't. I was with everyone else. We all didn't think. Some people did, but 80% of the UFC fan base did not think that Dricus du Plessis was a good fighter. And I was part of that. I fucking changed my mind. The Rob fight was a little bit of a wake up to that, but it was still questionable. I just simply was not doubting him anymore. I was more like, yeah, this guy's kind of an animal. We'll see where he goes, and we'll see where he takes this and how he does it. And then he took it into the Strickland fight and really, really proved his worth. So tough guy, man. But Costa versus Whittaker led to Whittaker winning by unanimous decision. I think Robert Whittaker will be in the next 2 or 3 middleweight title fights. So the next one won't have Whittaker in it. The one after that could, and the one after that could. So not the next one, but the 2 after that, I think Whittaker is in there. Either he will get a shot just based off of his position now, or I think his next fight's a number 1 contender match. And that will lead him into the next of those 2 title fights coming after the next one. There's no other middleweight fights that make sense. There isn't, because why would, he's only lost to Izzy and Dricus. Whittaker's only lost to those 2. I don't think that he lost. So first of all, he fought Dricus as a contender. Dricus then went on to become champion, and we realized this guy's not really just a contender, so fair enough that Rob lost to him. And then Rob goes on to fight the next contender and wins, maintaining his aura to an extent. He had a bad fight, but he maintained his aura. I think it would be weird for Rob to get title fight next, in his next fight, but I think the UFC could do it. I believe the number 1 contender fight makes most sense though. Izzy, Strickland, du Plessis, Whittaker, all 4 of them are pretty much the people that's... 2 of them will be in the next title fight, and the other 2 will be in a number 1 contender fight. That's what I think. That is what I think. I think that should happen. Khamzat, possible. Khamzat's a 4.5. Those 4.5. Khamzat is maybe. Okay, I don't think Khamzat should be in the next things unless he needs to do something crazy. He needs to fight a top 5 guy and just mollywop him. He needs to go Kevin Holland mode on someone again. He needs to go Li Jingliang mode on someone again, because he hasn't done that in his last 3 fights, 2 fights. Oh no, sorry, Kevin Holland was that fight, wasn't it? That Gilbert Burns fight was before the Kevin Holland fight. True. Okay, but still, you understand what I mean. I could be wrong. Those fights could be... I'm sorry. I don't quite remember. But Khamzat needs to make that difference if he wants to get into the title fight conversation. Otherwise, it's those 4 guys. I believe that. Up next, we have Henry versus Merab. Now, this one's interesting. I'm just going to go over it very quickly. I just want to say that Henry put up a fight, and it was awesome to see that he still, to an extent, has it late in his career, but I think he has, to an extent, lost a bit of it. He's not entirely there. He's not entirely as good as he once was. But against a contender like Merab, he put up a fucking fight. especially in that first round. That first round against Merab was a different animal, okay? That's a different Henry Cejudo. The last 2 rounds were not as good, obviously. Merab started to take over. He put the pace on him. His cardio worked out more in his favor. But when I saw Henry rock Merab in that first round, I thought there's no way Merab is recovering and pulling this fight back. And he did. So I have to give him credit for that. As well as I want to give Merab credit for the way he fought in this fight. It's different. It was very different. I don't know if that's because it was a 3-round fight. That's because it was against Henry Cejudo, who is a very, very talented wrestler. But he didn't crotch sniff the entire fight. He didn't do it. He didn't crotch sniff his way to 30 failed takedown attempts, which like he always does. This time, he did obviously wrestle still, and he still grappled a lot, but he stood a lot with Henry, and I really am unable to attribute that to something. I cannot figure out whether that should be attributed to Henry's wrestling and takedown defense and ability to seem like diving in on a takedown against him is not a smart choice, or if Henry just wanted to change something up. If Henry feels like maybe Merab wanted to change something up, and he feels like maybe his style could do with a bit of practice in other realms, and that's what he used that fight for. Whatever it may be, he fought better. And I certainly hope to see Merab fight like that in future. Merab will not get anywhere near the hate that he gets online from the fan base if he fights the way he fought Henry in every other fight. If you fight like the Piotr Jan fight in all of your fights, no one will ever support you. No one will ever support you. If you fight like the Henry fight in all of your fights, we will all support you because that was so much better. You actually stood and traded. You actually used your footwork. You actually had some defensive grappling moments when Henry was diving in on you. You were able to get takedowns that you didn't simply sit at the crotch of. You were able to pull Henry down to the ground and get dominant positions on him. You were able to pick Henry up. Do shit like that. Do shit like that. Do not sit with your head between legs and your arms around thighs. That is not going to get you any fans, even if it gets you victories, okay? It won't, because it's boring as fuck. Failed double legs are the most boring thing in the entire sport, okay? That fight against Henry was far from the most boring thing in the entire sport, okay? So please, Merab, that is what we want to see more of. Absolutely show me more of that. That is what I want. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you did enjoy this episode of the Mixed Martial Podcast. Be sure to tune in to the next one, as well as check out the rest of the episodes if you are interested in that. Join me live most weekends, not every weekend, but most weekends. I'd say 3 out of 4 weekends for voice crack. I apologize. For my fight companions that I do on every pay-per-view. We'll have one, but every now and then I'll miss out a fight night card, just depending on how comfortable I am talking about. I don't want to sit and give commentary on fights that I don't understand. I do not want to talk about guys that I haven't seen before, or at least haven't heard of before, haven't seen highlights of, any of that kind of stuff. But main cards of almost all fight nights are pretty doable, and pay-per-views are always doable. Even into the prelims at times, I'm able to be pretty confident in talking about some of those fights publicly. So be sure to join me if that is the kind of thing that you like, or the reactions will always come out within about a week of the event happening. So thank you guys for joining me. I hope you did enjoy this episode of the Mixed Martial Podcast. Be sure to leave a like, subscribe, throw on notifications if you don't want to miss an upload. Leave a comment telling me what you thought, if there's anything else you'd like to see me talk about in the next episode. And I'll see you guys all